Limata. He will be starting soon. Oh, story time with Mr. Limata, where all your dreams come true. Oh, he brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't live lonely, won't you start all the reading? I just can't wait to be hearing story time with Mr. Limata. He will be starting soon. Oh, story time with Mr. Limata, where all your dreams come true. Oh, he brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't leave lonely, won't you start all the reading? I just can't wait to be hearing.
Good morning, and welcome to Story Time. Thank you so much for joining me today. Happy Thursday to you. I hope that you are doing well. Thank you indeed for joining in, and apologies for coming in late. Oof. Very much on Zambian time today, but we're here and another story awaits. Oh, another reading awaits. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Storytime. And excited to bring this one coming back from SCHIFFER Kids. Haven't brought this one to Storytime in a long time. I haven't brought it back to Storytime in a long time. And it's here today, coming back head to head. 18 linked portraits of people who changed the world, and this one is written by Baptiste CORNABAS and illustrations by ANTOINE CORBINEAU, and we are reading it as mentioned with permission of the publishers, SCHIFFER Kids. Thank you so much to you, of course, Carol Morrison, for introducing us to SCHIFFER Kids. Thank you indeed for being here. Thank you for joining in Storytime. I hope that you are well. Please let us know wherever you are, how you are doing, and hope everything is okay. Yes, indeed. Happy to be here today, and another exciting book. And as we continue to remind ourselves, Pamela Courtney has a brand new book that is coming out on May 20th, and this one is called A Season for Fishing, a Fish Fry Tradition, and it is illustrated by Tony D. Chambers and will be published by Farah Strauss and Giroux, an imprint of Macmillan Publishing. Thank you so much for being here with us. Please let your librarians know, let your teachers know, let your whoever is responsible for books in your area, let them know to get this one, stock it in your library. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Storytime. Absolutely appreciate you. Good morning to you, Soraya, and of course, Sharon Lungo. How are you doing out there in Oakland? Thank you for being here with us. Always a pleasure to see you here joining Storytime. I hope that you are ready for this wonderful book, Head to Head. And we're going to look at just two personalities, or one pair, that we're going to share with you this morning, and hopefully you can find this at your local library and get to dive into those different personalities that are in there. And before that, I'll just read a little bit of the introduction so we can get in that together and just get a bit more understanding of the book. It is a beautiful one indeed, and cannot wait to share. So I'll be right back after a short break where you can join me and we can get started with this wonderful book. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Storytime. I'll see you on the other side of this very short message. Thank you for joining us this morning.
I'm Meenal Patel, and I am an artist, designer, and the author and illustrator of Priya Dreams of Marigolds and Masala, and you are watching Storytime with Mr. Limata.
Welcome back indeed. Thank you so much for joining in here today, and we bring you this book, Head to Head, coming to us from SCHIFFER Kids, written by Baptiste CORNABAS, illustrations by Antoine Corbineau, and of course this one is called Head to Head, 18 linked portraits of people who changed the world. Here is a little bit too, just the introduction. And I think, the end papers are just stunning. Kind of actually reminds me of the work of Minal Patel. If you've seen Priya Dreams of Marigolds and Masala, or do follow Minal Patel at minalpatelstudio.com. You get to see a lot of illustrations similar to this as well, and just as beautiful. So there you go. I've just had to show you that. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Storytime Head to Head SCHIFFER Kids. Thank you indeed for letting us read this one right here on Storytime. And it states in here, well, there's more. It states in here too, says, I'll read the second paragraph of the introduction. It's not too long of an introduction, but I'll skip over so we can get into, at least get to read two of the personalities. The world is full of people, some ordinary, some extraordinary, who rethink and revolutionize our daily lives. They perform amazing work, fight for rights and freedom, and seek to discover what is hidden or unknown. But giving you a list of these change makers is not the point of this book. Instead, we will compare 18 people, 9 pairs, who have left their mark during their lifetime. They have not always been perfect. But they will have tried to make our world a better place. Yeah. So something to just think about as we go into looking at the personalities that are covered in this book. And of course, we're only going to look at 2 today, or 1 pair. Thank you so much for joining in. Good morning to you. How are you doing today, Kathy? Thank you for being here out there in Ohio, where you do say it is cloudy. And as I was driving in this morning, I got to look up and I could still see the moon, and it was kind of behind clouds a little bit. And it reminded me of a laugh I had a while back, and thinking the moon looked fuzzy. And yeah, just something I... If you're listening and you know that one, you know what I'm talking about, right? If you know, you know. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Storytime. But please, if you don't know, it's just a joke, something that happened recently. All right, so here we go, and we're going to be looking at 2 personalities, right? Well, there's this part that talks about resisting, right? And so many different ways, but we're going to be looking at 2 people, and we're going to pick out Gandhi and Rosa Parks, and we can look at their stories. I know you already know. Hi, Soraya, how are you doing? Thank you indeed for being here, Gandhi and Rosa Parks. Yes, what's the connection? And that's what the book was saying, the introduction was saying, right? Like, you may not fully understand the connection between the personalities picked, but hopefully as we read, it gets to make sense. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime too. How are you doing today, Pamela Courtney, out there in Natchitoches, Louisiana? Thank you so much for joining in. Auntie Anne, I see you. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Storytime. So let's read this story. Let's find out what it's all about. Mahatma Gandhi. Biography. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born on October 2, 1869 in Pombadar, India, then a part of the British Empire. The word Gandhi means grasser, and it comes from the caste, social class to which his family belonged. Gandhi was raised as a Hindu, but he also learned about other religions such as Jainism. The Jain religion promotes nonviolence and respect for all human and animal life. When Gandhi was 13 years old, he married Kastabai, who was 14. Kastabai's parents had chosen Gandhi for their daughter, a practice known as arranged marriage. The couple got along well, and Kastabai was loyal to her husband until the end of her life. In 1888, when Gandhi was 18, he went alone to England to study law. He finished in 1891 and returned to India, but he was not successful as a lawyer. In 1893, he moved with his family to South Africa. A large Indian community lived there, and he became an interpreter. While there, he was confronted with racism directed at Black people and Indians. Experiencing this discrimination as an immigrant set Gandhi on his path to activism. For the next 20 years, he led a struggle of non-cooperation and nonviolent resistance against the South African authorities. He was protesting the inequalities that favored white people over the Black and Indian communities. In 1915, Gandhi returned to India. After World War I ended in 1918, he pleaded for the independence of his homeland from British control. As he had in South Africa, Gandhi chose nonviolent resistance, organizing boycotts and acts of civil disobedience. Thousands of Indians joined him in the fight. He was arrested several times and spent a total of 6 years in prison. On August 15, 1947, after decades of struggle with the people of India, the British finally granted the country its independence. But it did not go as planned. India was divided between Muslims and Hindus, which led to the formation of Pakistan and current boundaries of India. The separation caused the death of millions of people when populations were displaced. Gandhi tried to intervene between Muslims and Hindus to avoid bloodshed. He was killed by a Hindu fanatic on January 30, 1948. Rosa Parks, here's the story. Rosa Louise Macaulay was born on February 4th, 1913 in Alabama. At age 11, she was not born at age 11. Let me read that again. Rosa Louise Macaulay was born on February 4th, 1913 in Alabama. At age 11, she began attending a school for Black children. At that time, there were laws segregating whites and Blacks, who were disadvantaged and subjected to racism every day. For example, Rosa had to walk to school because the school bus was reserved for white children. Beginning in 1930, Rosa worked as a seamstress. In 1932, at age 19, she married Raymond Parks, a civil rights activist. Raymond was fighting to ensure that Blacks and whites had the same rights as citizens of the United States. Like Raymond, Rosa became active in the American Civil Rights Movement. In 1943, she joined the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. In 1955, Rosa entered history as a hero. At that time, in the city of Montgomery, Alabama, the first rows of buses were reserved for white people. Black people were to sit in the seats at the back. One day, Rosa was sitting in the black seats on a crowded bus. A white man got on, and the driver told Rosa to give up her seat for him. This was too much. She refused to move. It was not the first time Rosa had resisted unfair treatment, but this time she was arrested and fined. To support her, many Black leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr., a local pastor who campaigned nonviolently for Black civil rights, organized a bus boycott in Montgomery. For 381 days, thousands of people refused to ride the bus. On November 13, 1956, the Supreme Court declared that segregation, the separation of Blacks and whites on municipal buses, did not respect the U.S. Constitution. As a result of her act and its outcome, Rosa was a symbol of the fight against racial segregation and for civil rights in the United States. In 1964, 9 years after the incident on the bus, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act, which outlawed all forms of discrimination. Legal segregation in the United States was officially ended. But Rosa Parks continued to work for justice, calling attention to inequalities in access to housing for Black people. After the bus boycott, Rosa and her family moved to Michigan to escape death threats. She died in Detroit on October 24, 2005. Thousands of people attended her funeral, and all the flags in the country were lowered to half-mast. Even the Montgomery Bus Company paid her a final tribute by covering the front seats of its bus with Rosa's photo. And the common point for these two: they fought without violence. After slavery was abolished in the United States in the 1800s, laws were passed to maintain a strict separation of black and white people. They were prohibited from marrying each other and sitting together on public transportation. Rosa grew up during racial segregation. She decided to fight against the discrimination in a nonviolent way. Rosa's activism began in 1943 when she became a member of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. She was angry that so few African Americans could register to vote. Black men had been granted the right to vote in 1870, and Black women had gained suffrage in 1920. But in reality, most were unable to exercise their right to their right were most were unable to exercise their right because of rules and policies that prevented them from registering. In 1945, after 3 attempts, Rosa finally succeeded in registering to vote. She was not the only person, nor the first, to fight for rights of Black people. It was her act of civil disobedience decades later that brought about real change. After she was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus in 1955, the local NAACP president bailed her out of prison. He then used his connections to rally the Black community to boycott the bus company. The protest was led by a local pastor named Martin Luther King Jr., who became a leader in the nonviolent struggle for the civil rights of African Americans. Another model for Martin Luther King was Gandhi. Gandhi began his nonviolent struggle while living in South Africa between 1893 and 1915. He entered politics and founded the Natal Indian Congress to defend the rights of the Indian community. This party inspired Nelson Mandela's African National Congress. Like Rosa's act of defiance, Gandhi's actions against discriminatory laws were carried out nonviolently through demonstrations, petitions, and boycotts. Later, he chose the same methods to fight against injustices in his homeland. But in India, he was fighting for independence from British rule. Gandhi developed a policy called Satyagraha, a form of nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience. He refused to obey unjust laws, putting pressure on the authorities to annul these rules. He joined the Indian National Congress political party and became one of its main leaders. The party followed his principles of nonviolence and non-cooperation. In 1918, Gandhi organized a boycott against the British policy of forcing Indian farmers to cultivate indigo, for dyeing clothes. The farmers could not grow the food they needed to survive, causing famine and poverty. The British authorities relented, but Gandhi's struggle was far from over. In 1930, he rose up to protest the British monopoly on salt, which prevented Indians from extracting salt from their own country. Gandhi organized a peaceful march nearly 250 miles long. Across the country and to the sea, thousands of Indians joined him, and together they collected salt. This way of defying injustice peacefully has inspired many struggles and protests worldwide. Thank you so much for joining in Story Time this morning. Yeah, a little bit of a heavy book, but one that we must read for sure. Thank you so much for joining in. And of course, it is head-to-head 18 linked portraits of people who changed the world. And that's just one pair that we read. But there are 9 pairs in here. So 18 different personalities that you can get to read about and see those connections that are there, or that the author is making between those two. For example, today we're looking at Rosa Parks and Gandhi. What is the connection? Thank you so much for joining in Story Time today. And we know the struggles that they both went through, and of course, the fight that they put up. And thank you. Really, when you look back, there's so many things that I'm sure that today we're benefiting from their hard work. And that is the thing about struggle and fight and fighting for rights, right? Like you might not always see the fruits of your labor in your time, but remembering that the work that we're putting in is for those generations to come, for sure. So thank you so much for joining in here on Storytime. I hope you enjoyed that one, and I hope that it piques your interest, curiosity, and I hope that you dive into a lot more personalities, and of course looking at what's happening in the country right now here in the US, and just thinking things that are being rolled back. I mean, we just heard about the federal law that pretty much would allow things like, segregation as we keep rolling back DEI. So yeah, pretty interesting times that we're living in, and I hope that reminders like this encourage us to step out there, to also play our part, in our own small way, right? Leave our mark. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Storytime. Absolutely appreciate the time that we get to spend together. And this was our book for today, from SCHIFFER Kids, Head to Head, and it is written by Baptiste CORNABAS, illustrations by ANTOINE CORBINEAU, and of course we were reading this one today with permission of SCHIFFER Kids, as mentioned. Thank you for joining in, and I hope that we've been inspired, we've been reminded of the role that we have to play. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime. Absolutely appreciate you. Pamela Courtney, very welcome. And tomorrow we're back with another exciting book, and we bring back What Can a Citizen Do? I was supposed to have read it last Friday, but due to circumstances beyond my control here, wasn't able to do that. But we'll definitely bring that one tomorrow. We'll bring it back, another one that really reminds us and encourages us to take those little steps, little actions in our communities. Thank you so much for being here on Storytime with us. And remember too that Pamela Courtney is a brand new book coming out on May 20th, A Season for Fishing, a fish fry tradition. And this one is illustrated by Tony D. Chambers and will be published by Farrar Straus and Giroux, and imprint of Macmillan Publishing. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Storytime. Find this one, pre-order now, or indeed find it where you find books. Ask your local librarians to stock it. Ask your school librarians to try and bring it so they have it on the shelves and you can join in and enjoy. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Storytime. And one more time, congratulations to you, Pamela Courtney, on that wonderful book. Cannot wait to see it on our shelves. Cannot wait to see it on the Storytime shelf right here. Thank you so much for joining in. I will see you again tomorrow. This has been Storytime for today. Thank you to you, Kathy, for joining in. And of course, Luna, sending you lots of love out there in Ohio, where it is cloudy today. Thank you for being here. Soraya, and of course, Sharon Lungo. Thank you so much for joining us from out there in Oakland. And to everybody that is here live, thank you. Biggest of hugs. And of course, to everybody that is joining in later on for the recordings, whether you are on Facebook, Instagram, storytimewithmisslimata.com, Storytime with Miss Limata on Instagram. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing to be a part of Storytime. And indeed, we continue to share books, get lost in the worlds that they create, and of course, to remind ourselves, keep reminding each other, learning from each other to make the world a better place. Thank you so much for being here. Biggest of hugs. I'll see you again tomorrow when we're back with another exciting story. Bye-bye.
Story time with Mr. Limata. He will be starting soon. Oh, story time with Mr. Limata, where all your dreams come true. Oh, he brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't live lonely. Won't you start all the reading? I just can't wait to be hearing story time with Mr. Limata. He will be starting soon. Oh, story time with Mr. Limata, where all your dreams come true. Oh, to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't leave lonely, you won't just start all the reading. I just can't wait to be hearing. Brings to life your favorite stories with this great big smile. You won't leave lonely, you won't just start all the reading. We just can't wait to be hearing. They gotta look and think, read me all of the stories. Read me all of the stories. Some stories from far away, others right here in my neighborhood. Story time. Ooh. Story time. Story time with Mr. Limata. He will be starting soon. Story time with Mr. Limata, where all your dreams come true. Oh. He brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't live lonely, you won't just start all the reading. We just can't wait to be hearing. Brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't live lonely, you won't just start all the reading. We just can't wait to be hearing.